When the weather gets warm, she leaves the top down for nights at a time, so the seats are always sticky. Rabbit swings down the overhead garage door and carries up the cement walk through the backyard like twin-car headlights into a tunnel, his strange consciousness of having not one child now but two. Janice greets him in the kitchen. Something's up. She is wearing a crisp frock with pepperminty stripes, but her hair is still scraggly and damp from an afternoon of swimming at the club pool. Nearly every day she has a tennis date with some of her girlfriends at the club they belong to, the Flying Eagle Tea and Racket, a newish organization laid out on the lower slopes of Mount Judge's woodsy brother mountain with the Indian name, Mount Pemaquid, and then kills the rest of the afternoon lying at poolside, gossiping or playing cards, and getting slowly spaced on spritzers or vodka and tonics. Harry likes having a wife who can be at the club so much. Janice is thickening through the middle at the age of 44, but her legs are still hard and neat. And brown. She was always dark-complected, and with July not even here, she has the tan of a savage, legs and arms almost black, like some little Polynesian in an old John Hall movie. Her lower lip bears a trace of zinc oxide, which is sexy, even though he never loved that stubborn slot-like set her mouth gets. Her still wet hair, pulled back, reveals a high forehead somewhat mottled, like brown paper where water has been dropped and dried. He can tell by the kind of heat she is giving off that she and her mother have been fighting. "What's up now?" he asks. "It's been wild," Janice says. "She's in her room and says we should eat without her." "Yeah, well, she'll be down. But what's to eat? I don't see anything cooking." The digital clock built into the stove says 6:32. "Harry, honest to God, I was going to shop as soon as I came back and changed out of tennis things, but then this postcard was here, and Mother and I have been at it ever since. Anyway, it's summer. You don't want to eat too much. Doris Kaufman, I'd give anything to have her serve. She says she never has more than a glass of iced tea for lunch, even in the middle of winter. I thought maybe soup and those cold cuts I bought that you and Mother refused to touch. They have to be eaten sometime. And the lettuce is coming on in the garden now so fast we must start having salads before it gets all leggy." She had planted a little vegetable garden in the part of the backyard where Nelson's swing set used to be, getting a man from down the block to turn the earth with his rototiller, the earth miraculously soft and pungent beneath the crust of winter, and Janice out there enthusiastic with her string and rake in the gauzy shadows of the budding trees. But now that summer is here, and the leafed-out trees keep the garden in the shade, and the games at the club have begun, she has let the plot go to weeds. Still, he cannot dislike this brown-eyed woman, who has been his indifferent wife for 23 years just this May. He is rich because of her inheritance, and this mutual knowledge rests adhesively between them like a form of sex, comfortable and sly. "Salad and bologna, my favorite meal," he says, resigned. "Let me have a drink first. Some bastards came into the lot today just as I was leaving. Tell me what postcard." As he stands by the refrigerator making a gin and bitter lemon, knowing the sugary mixers add to the calories in the alcohol and help to keep him overweight, but figuring that this Saturday evening meal in its skimpiness will compensate, and maybe he'll jog a little afterwards, Janice goes in through the dark dining room into the musty front parlor where the shades are drawn and Ma Springer's sulking spirit reigns, and brings back a postcard. It shows a white slope of snow under a stark blue wedge of sky. Two small, dark, hunched figures are tracing linked S's on the slanted snow, skiing. "Greetings from Colorado," red cartoon letters say across the sky that looks like blue paint. On the opposite side, a familiar scrawled hand, scrunched as if something in the boy had been squeezed too tight while his handwriting was coming to birth, spells out, "Hi, Mom and Dad and Grandmom. These mountains make Mount Judge look sick. No snow, though, just plenty of grass. Joke. Been learning to hang glide. Job didn't work out, guy was a bum. Penna beckons. Okay, if I bring Melanie home too, she could get job and be no trouble. Love, Nelson. Melanie, Harry asks. That's what Mother and I have been fighting about. She doesn't want the girl staying here. Is this the same girl he went out there with 2 weeks ago? I was wondering, Jenna says. She had a name more like Sue or Joe or something. Where would she sleep? Well, either in that front sewing room or Nelson's room. With the kid? Well, really, Harry, I wouldn't be utterly surprised. He is 22. When have you gotten so puritanical? I'm not being puritanical, just practical. It's one thing to have these kids go off into the blue and go hang-gliding or whatever else, and another to have them bring all their dope and little tootsies back to the nest. This house is awkward upstairs, you know that. There's too much hall space, and you can't sneeze or fart or fuck without everybody else hearing. It's been bliss, frankly, with just us and Ma. Remember the kid's radio all through high school to 2 in the morning, how he'd fall asleep to it? That bed of his is a little single. What are we supposed to do, buy him and Melody a double bed? Melanie. I don't know. She can sleep on the floor. They all have sleeping bags. You can try putting her in the sewing room, but I know she won't stay there. We wouldn't have. Her blurred, dark eyes gaze beyond him into time. We spent all our energy sneaking down hallways and squirming around in the back seats of cars, and I thought we could spare our children that. We have a child, not children, he says coldly, as the gin expands his inner space. They had children once, but the infant daughter, Becky, died. It was his wife's fault. The entire squeezed and cut-down shape of his life is her fault. At every turn she has been a wall to his freedom. Listen, he says to her, I've been trying to get out of this fucking depressing house for years, and I don't want this shiftless, arrogant goof-off we've raised coming back and pinning me in. These kids seem to think the world exists to serve them, but I'm sick of just standing around waiting to be of service. Janice stands up to him, scarcely flinching, armored in her country club tan. He is our son, Harry, and we're not going to turn away a guest of his because she is female in sex. If it was a boyfriend of Nelson's, you wouldn't be at all this excited. It's the fact that it's a girlfriend of Nelson's that's upsetting you, a girlfriend of Nelson's. If it was a girlfriend of yours, the upstairs wouldn't be too crowded for you to fart in. This is my son, and I want him here if he wants to be here. I don't have any girlfriends, he protests. It sounds pitiful. Is Janice saying he should have? Women, once sex gets out in the open, they become monsters. You're a creep if you fuck them, and a creep if you don't. Harry strides into the dining room, making the glass panes of the antique break front shudder, and calls up the dark, stained stairs that are opposite the break front. Hey, Bessie, come on down. I'm on your side. There is a silence as from God above, and then the creak of a bed being relieved of a weight, and reluctant footsteps slither across the ceiling toward the head of the stairs. Mrs. Springer, on her painful dropsical legs, comes down talking. This house is legally mine, and that girl is not spending one night under a roof Janice's father slaved all his days to keep over our heads. The break front quivers again. Janice has come into the dining room. She says in a voice turned tight to match her mother's, Mother, you wouldn't be keeping this enormous roof over your head if it weren't for Harry and me sharing the upkeep. It's a great sacrifice on Harry's part, a man of his income not having a house he can call his own, and you have no right to forbid Nelson to come home when he wants to. No right, Mother. The plump old lady groans her way down to the landing 3 steps shy of the dining-room floor and hesitates there, saying, in a voice tears have stained, Nellie, I'm happy to see whenever he deems fit. I love that boy with all my heart, even though he hasn't turned out the way his grandfather and I had hoped. Janice says, angrier in proportion as the old lady makes herself look pathetic, You're always bringing Daddy in when he can't speak for himself, but as long as he was alive he was very hospitable and tolerant of Nelson and his friends. I remember that cookout Nelson had in the backyard for his high school graduation when Daddy had had his first stroke already. I went upstairs to see if it was getting too rowdy for him, and he said with his wry little smile, tears now stain her own voice too, "The sound of young voices does my old heart good." That slippery, quick salesman's smile of his, Rabbit can see it still, like a switchblade without the click. "A cookout in the backyard is one thing," Mrs. Springer says, thumping herself in her dirty aqua sneakers down the last 3 steps of the stairs and looking her daughter level in the eye. "A slut in the boy's bed is another." Harry thinks this is pretty jazzy for an old lady and laughs aloud. Janice and her mother are both short women. Like 2 dolls' heads mounted on the same set of levers, they turn identically chocolate-eyed, slut-mouthed faces to glare at his laugh. "We don't know the girl is a slut," Harry apologizes. "All we know is her name is Melanie instead of Sue." "You said you were on my side," Mrs. Springer says. "I am, Ma, I am. I don't see why the kid has to come storming home. We gave him enough money to get him started out there. I'd like to see him get some kind of grip on the world. He's not going to get it hanging around here all summer." "Oh, money," Janice says. "That's all you ever think about. And what have you ever done except hang around here? Your father got you one job and my father got you another. I don't call that any great adventure." "That's not all I think about," he begins lamely, of money, before his mother-in-law interrupts. "Harry doesn't want a home of his own," Ma Springer tells her daughter. When she gets excited and fearful of not making herself understood, her face puffs up and goes mottled. "He has such disagreeable associations from the last time you 2 went out on your own." Janice is firm, younger, in control. "Mother, you know nothing about it. You know nothing about life, period. You sit in this house and watch idiotic game shows and talk on the phone to what friends you have that haven't died off yet, and then sit in judgment on Harry and me. You know nothing of life now. You have no idea." "As if playing games at a country club with the nickel rich and coming home tiddled every night is enough to make you wise," the old lady comes back, holding on with one hand to the knob of the newel post as if to ease the pain in her ankles. "You come home," she goes on, "too silly to make your husband a decent supper, and then want to bring this tramp into a house where I do all the housekeeping, even if I can scarcely stand to stand. I'm the one that would be here with them. You'd be off in that convertible. What will the neighbors make of it? What about the people in the church?" "I don't care, even if they care, which I dare say they won't," Janice says. "And to bring the church into it is ridiculous. The last minister at St. John's ran off with Mrs. Eckenroth, and this one now is so gay I wouldn't let my boy go to his Sunday school if I had a boy that age." "Nellie didn't go that much anyway," Harry recalls. "He said it gave him headaches." He wants to lower the heat between the 2 women before it boils over into grief. He sees he must break this up, get a house of his own, before he runs out of gas. Stone outside, exposed beams inside, and a sunken living room. That is his dream. "Melanie," his mother-in-law is saying, "what kind of name is that? It sounds colored." "Oh, Mother, don't drag out all your prejudices. You sit and giggle at the Jeffersons as if you're one of them, and Harry and Charlie unload all their old gas hogs on the blacks, and if we take their money we can take what else they have to offer too." Can she actually be black, Harry is asking himself, thrilled. Little cocoa babies. Skeeter would be so pleased. "Anyway," Janice is going on, looking frazzled suddenly, "nobody said the girl is black. All we know is she hang glides." "Or is that the other one?" Harry asks. "If she comes, I go," Bessie Springer says. "Grace Stuhl has all those empty rooms now that Ralph's passed on, and she's more than once said we should team up." "Mother, I find that humiliating, that you've been begging Grace Stuhl to take you in." "I haven't been begging. The thought just naturally occurred to the both of us. I'd expect to be bought out here, though, and the values in the neighborhood have been going way up since they banned the through truck traffic." "Mother, Harry hates this house." He says, still hoping to calm these waters, "I don't hate it exactly. I just think the space upstairs—" "Harry," Janice says, "why don't you go out and pick some lettuce from the garden like we said, then we'll eat." Gladly. He is glad to escape the house, the pinch of the women, their heat. Crazy the way they flog at each other with these ghosts of men, Daddy dead, Nelson gone, and even Harry himself a kind of ghost in the way they talk of him, as if he wasn't standing right there. Day after day, mother and daughter sharing that same house, it's not natural. Like water, blood must run or grow a scum. Old Lady Springer always plump with that sausage look to her wrists and ankles, but now her face puffy as well, like those movie stars whose cheeks they stuff cotton up into to show them getting older. Her face not just plumper, but wider, as if a screw turning inside is spreading the sides of her skull apart, her eyes getting smaller, Janice heading the same way, though she tries to keep trim. There's no stopping heredity. Rabbit notices now his own father talking in his own brain sometimes when he gets tired. Bitter lemon fading in his mouth, an aluminum colander pleasantly light in his hand, he goes down the brick back steps into grateful space. He feels the neighborhood filter through to him, and the voices in his brain grow still. Dark green around him is damp with coming evening, though this long day's lingering brightness surprises his eye above the shadowy masses of the trees. Rooftops and dormers notch the blue, beginning to blush brown. Here also electric wires and television aerials mar with their scratches the soft beyond. A few swallows dipping, as they do at day's end, in the middle range of air above the merged backyards, where little more than a wire fence or a line of hollyhocks marks the divisions of property. When he listens, he can hear the sounds of cooking clatter or late play, alive in this common realm with a dog's bark, a bird's weep-weep, the rhythmic far tapping of a hammer. A crew of butch women has moved in a few houses down, and they're always out in steel-toed boots and overalls with ladders and hammers fixing things. They can do it all, from rain gutters to cellar doors. Terrific. He sometimes waves to them when he jogs by in twilight, but they don't have much to say to him, a creature of another kind. Rabbit swings open the imperfect little gate he constructed 2 springs ago and enters the fenced rectangle of silent vegetable presences. The lettuce flourishes between a row of bean plants whose leaves are badly bug-eaten and whose stems collapse at a touch, and a row of feathery carrot tops, all but lost in an invasion of plantain and chickweed and purslane, and a pulpy weed with white and yellow flowers that grows inches every night. It is easy to pull, its roots let go docilely, but there are so many he wearies within minutes of pulling and shaking the moist earth free from the roots, and laying bundles of the weed along the chicken wire fence as mulch and as barrier to the invading grasses. Grass that won't grow in the lawn, where you plant it, comes in here wild to multiply. Seed, so disgustingly much of it, nature such a cruel smotherer. He thinks again of the dead he has known, the growingly many, and of the live child, if not his, then some other father's, who visited him today with her long white legs propped up on cork heels. And of the other child, undoubtedly his, the genes show even in that quick, scared way he looks at you, who has threatened to return. Rabbit pinches off the bigger lettuce leaves, but not the ones at the base so big as to be tough and bitter, and looks into his heart for welcoming love for his son. He finds instead a rumple of apprehensiveness in form and texture, like a towel tumbled too soon from the dryer. He finds 100 memories, some vivid as photographs and meaningless, snapped by the mind for reasons of its own, and others mere facts, things he knows are true but has no snapshot for. Our lives fade behind us before we die. He changed the boy's diapers in the sad apartment high on Wilbur Street. He lived with him for some wild months in an apple-green ranch house called 26 Vista Crescent in Penn Villas. And here at 89 Joseph, he watched him become a high school student with a wispy mustache that showed when he stood in the light, and a headband like an Indian's instead of getting a haircut, and a fortune in rock records kept in the sunny room whose drawn shades are above Harry's head now. He and Nelson have been through enough years together to turn a cedar post to rot, and yet his son is less real to Harry than these crinkled leaves of lettuce he touches and plucks. Sad. Who says? The calm eyes of the girl who showed up at the lot today haunt the growing shadows, a mystery arrived at this time of his own numb life, death taking his measure with the invisible tapping of that neighborhood hammer. Each day he is a little less afraid to die. He spots a Japanese beetle on a bean plant leaf, and with a snap of his fingernail, big fingernails with conspicuous cuticle moons, snaps the iridescent creature off. Die. Back in the house, Janice exclaims, "You've picked enough for 6 of us." "Where'd Ma go?" "She's in the front hall on the telephone to Grace Stool. Really, she's impossible. I really think senility is setting in. Harry, what shall we do?" "Ride with the punches?" "Oh, great." "Well, honey, it is her house, not ours and Nelson's." "Oh, drop dead. You're no help." An illumination rises sluggishly within her sable, gin-blurred eyes. "You don't want to be any help," she announces. "You just like to see us fight." The evening passes in a stale crackle of television and suppressed resentment. Waitin' for some lover to call. Ma Springer, having condescended to share with them at the kitchen table some lumpy mushroom soup Janice has warmed, and the cold cuts, slightly sweaty from waiting too long in the refrigerator, and all that salad he picked, stalks upstairs to her own room and shuts the door with a firmness that must carry out into the neighborhood as far as the Butch women's house. A few cars looking for hot stuff prowl by on Joseph Street with that wet tire sound that makes Harry and Janice feel alone as on an island. For supper they opened a half-gallon of Gallo Chablis, and Janice keeps drifting into the kitchen to top herself up, so that by 10 o'clock she is lurching in that way he hates. He doesn't blame people for many sins, but he does hate uncoordination, the root of all evil as he feels it, for without coordination there can be no order, no connecting. In this state she bumps against door frames coming through, and sets her glass on the sofa arm, so a big translucent lip of contents slops up and over into the fuzzy gray fabric. Together they sit through Battlestar Galactica, and enough of the Love Boat to know it's not one of the good cruises. When she gets up to fill her glass yet again, he switches to the Phillies game. The Phillies are being held to 1 hit by the Expos. He can't believe it, all that power. On the news, there is rioting in Levittown over gasoline. People are throwing beer bottles full of gasoline. They explode. It looks like old films of Vietnam or Budapest, but it is Levittown right down the road north of Philadelphia. A striking trucker is shown holding up a sign saying, "To hell with Shell," and 3 Mile Island leaking radioactive neutrons just down the road in the other direction. The weather for tomorrow looks good, as a massive high continues to dominate from the Rocky Mountain region eastward all the way to Maine. Time for bed. Harry knows in his bones, it has been borne in on him over the years, that on the nights of the days when Janice has fought with her mother and drunk too much, she will want to make love. The first decade of their marriage it was hard to get her to put out. There were a lot of things she wouldn't do and didn't even know were done, and these seemed to be the things most on Rabbit's mind. But then, since the affair with Charlie Stavros opened her up at about the time of the moonshot, and the style of the times proclaiming no holds barred, and for that matter, death eating enough into her body for her to realize it wasn't such a precious vessel, and there wasn't any Superman to keep saving it for, Harry has no complaints. Indeed, what complaints there might be in this line would come from her about him. Somewhere early in the Carter administration his interest, that had been pretty faithful, began to wobble, and by now there is a real crisis of confidence. He blames it on money, on having enough at last, which has made him satisfied all over. Also, the money itself, relaxed in the bank, gets smaller all the time, and this is on his mind, what to do about it, along with everything else, the fills and the dead and golf. He has taken the game up with a passion since they joined the Flying Eagle, without getting much better at it, or at least without giving himself any happier impression of an absolute purity and power hidden within the coiling of his muscles than some lucky shots in those first casual games he played once did. It is like life itself in that its performance cannot be forced, and its underlying principle shies from being permanently named. Arms like ropes, he tells himself sometimes, with considerable success, and then, when that goes bad, shift the weight. Or, don't chicken wing it. Or, keep the angle, meaning the angle between club and arms when wrists are cocked. Sometimes he thinks it's all in the hands, and then in the shoulders, and even in the knees. When it's in the knees, he can't control it. Basketball was somehow more instinctive. If you thought about merely walking down the street the way you think about golf, you'd wind up falling off the curb. Yet a good straight drive or a soft chip, stiff to the pin, gives him the bliss that used to come thinking of women, imagining if only you and she were alone on some island. Naked, Janice bumps against the doorframe from their bathroom back into their bedroom. Naked, she lurches onto the bed where he is trying to read the July issue of Consumer Reports and thrusts her tongue into his mouth. He tastes gallow, bologna, and toothpaste, while his mind is still trying to sort out the virtues and failings of the great range of can openers put to the test over 5 close pages of print. The Sunbeam units were most successful at opening rectangular and dented cans, and yet pierced coffee cans with such force that grains of coffee spewed out onto the counter. Elsewhere, slivers of metal were dangerously produced, magnets gripped so strongly that the contents of the cans tended to spatter. Blades failed to reach deep lips, and one small plastic insert so quickly wore away that the model, Echo C865K, was judged not acceptable. Amid these fine discriminations, Janice's tongue, like an eyeless, eager eel, intrudes and angers him. Ever since, in her late 30s, she had her tubes burned, to avoid any more bad side effects from the pill, a demon of loss, never any more children, never ever, has given her sexuality a false animation, a thrust somehow awry. Her eyes, as her face backs off from the kiss he has resisted, squirming, have in them no essential recognition of him, only a glaze of liquor and blank unfriendly wanting. By the light by which he had been trying to read, he sees the hateful aged flesh at the base of her throat, reddish and tense as if healed from a burn. He wouldn't see it so clearly if he didn't have his reading glasses on. "Jesus," he says, "at least let's wait till I turn out the light." "I like it on." Her insistence is slurred. "I like to see all the gray hair on your chest." This interests him. Is there much? He tries to see past his chin. It's not gray, it's just blonde, isn't it? Janice pulls the bedsheet down to his waist and crouches to examine him hair by hair. Her breasts hang down so her nipples, bumpily in texture like hamburger, sway an inch above his belly. "You do here and here." She pulls each gray hair. "Ouch! Damn you, Janice, stop!" He pushes his stomach up so her nipples vanish and her breasts are squashed against her own frail ribs. Gripping the hair of her head in one fist in his rage at being invaded, The other hand still holding the magazine, in which he was trying to read about magnets gripping, he arches his spine so she is thrown from his body to her side of the bed. In her boozy haze, mistaking this for love play, Janice tugs the sheet down still lower on him and takes his prick in a fumbling, twittering grip. Her touch is cold from having just washed her hands in the bathroom. The next page of Consumer Reports is printed on blue and asks, Summer Cooling, 1979, air conditioner or fan? He tries to skim the list of advantages and disadvantages peculiar to each. Bulky and heavy to install, as opposed to light and portable. Expensive to run, as against inexpensive to run. The fan seems to be scoring all the points, but can't quite disassociate himself from the commotion below his waist, where Janice's anxious fingers seem to be asking the same question over and over without getting the answer they want. Furious, he throws the magazine against the wall behind which Ma Springer sleeps. More carefully, he removes his reading glasses and puts them in his bedside table drawer and switches off the bedside lamp. His wife's importunate flesh must then compete with the sudden call to sleep that darkness brings. It has been a long day. He was awake at 6:30 and got up at 7. His eyelids have grown too thin to tolerate the early light. Even now, near midnight, he feels tomorrow's early dawn rotating toward him. He recalls again the blue-eyed apparition who seemed to be his and Ruth's genes mixed. He is reminded then, from so long ago, of that Ruth whom he fucked upwards the first time, saying hey in his surprise at her beauty. Her body one long underbelly erect in light from the street lamp outside on summer, his prick erect in her loveliness above him. Hey! It seems a melancholy falling that an act so glorious has been dwindled to this blurred burrowing of two old bodies, one drowsy and one drunk. Janice's rummaging at his prick has become hostile now as it fails to rise. Her attention burns upon it like sun's rays focused by a magnifying glass upon a scrap of silk. Kids used to kill ants that way. Harry watched but never participated. We are cruel enough without meaning to be. He resents that in her eagerness for some dilution of her sense of being forsaken, having quarreled with her mother, and perhaps also afraid of their son's return, Janice gives him no space of secrecy in which blood can gather as it did behind his fly in 9th grade algebra, sitting beside Lottie Bingaman, who, in raising her hand to show she had the answers, showed him wisps of armpit hair, and pressed the thin cotton of her blouse tighter against the elastic trusswork of her bra, so its salmon color strained through. Then the fear was the bell would ring, and he would have to stand with this hard-on. He resolves to suck Janice's tits, to give himself a chance to pull himself together. This is embarrassing. A pause at the top. You need a pause at the top to generate momentum. His spit glimmers within her dark shape above him. The headboard of their bed is placed between two windows, shaded from the light of sun and moon alike by a great copper beech whose leaves yet allow a little street-light through. That feels nice. He wishes she wouldn't say this. Nice isn't enough. Without some shadow of assault or outrage, it becomes another task, another duty. To think all along that Lottie was sitting there itching to be fucked. It wasn't just him. She was holding a dirty yearning between her legs, just like the lavatory walls said, those drawings and words put there by the same kids who magnified the ants to death. That little sticky pop they died with, you could hear it. Did girls, too, make a little sticky noise when they opened up? The thought of her knowing, when she raised her hand, that her blouse was tugged into wrinkles all pointing to the tip of her tit, and that an edge of bra peeped out through the cotton armhole with those little curly virgin hairs, and that he was watching for it all to happen, does make blood gather. In the fumbly worried dark, with Ma Springer sleeping off her sulk a thickness of plaster away, Harry, as if casually, presents his stiffened prick to Janice's hand. Hot stuff! But wanderings within her own brain have blunted her ardor, and her touch conveys this. It is too heavy, so in a desperate mood of self-rescue he hisses, "Suck," in her ear. Suck. Which she does, turning her back, her head heavy on his belly. Diagonal on the bed, he stretches one arm as if preparing to fly, and caresses her ass. These lower globes of hers less spherical than once they were, and the fur between more findable by his fingers. She learned to blow when she went away with Stavros, but doesn't really get her head into it, nibbles more, the top inch or two. To keep himself excited, he tries to remember Ruth, that exalted "hey," and the way she swallowed it once. But the effort brings back with such details the guilt of their months together, and betrayal betrayed, his desertion, and the final sour sorrow of it all. Janice lets him slide from her mouth and asks, "What are you thinking about?" "Work," he lies. "Charlie worries me. He's taking such good care of himself, you hate to ask him to do anything. I seem to handle most of the customers now." "Well, why not? You give yourself twice the salary he gets, and he's been there forever." "Yeah, but I married the boss's daughter. He could have, but didn't." "Marriage wasn't our thing," Janice says. "What was?" "Never mind." Absent-mindedly he strokes her long hair, soft from all that swimming, as it flows on his abdomen. "Pair of kids came into the lot late today," he begins to tell her, then thinks better of it. Now that her sexual push is past, his prick has hardened, the competing muscles of anxiety having at last relaxed. But she is relaxed all over, asleep with his prick in her face. "Want me inside?" he asks softly, getting no answer. He moves her off his chest and works her inert body around so they lie side by side, and he can fuck her from behind. She wakes enough to cry, "Oh," when he penetrates. Slickly admitted, he pumps slowly, pulling the sheet up over them both. Not hot enough yet for the fan versus air conditioner decision. Both are tucked around the attic somewhere. Back under the dusty eaves. Strain your back lifting it out. He has never liked the chill of air conditioning, even when it was only to be had at the movies, and thought to be a great treat, drawing you in right off the hot sidewalk. The word "cool" in blue-green with icicles on the marquee. Always seemed to him healthier to live in the air God gave, however lousy, and let your body adjust. Nature can adjust to anything. Still, some of these nights, sticky, and the cars passing below with that wet tire sound, the kids with their windows open or tops down, and radios blaring just at the moment of dropping off to sleep, your skin prickling wherever it touched cloth, and a single mosquito alive in the room. His prick is stiff as stone inside a sleeping woman. He strokes her ass, the crease where it nestles against his belly, must start jogging again, the crease between its halves and that place within the crease opposite of a nipple. Dawned on him gradually over these years that she had no objection to being touched there. Seemed to like it when she was under him, his hand beneath her bottom. He touches himself too now and then to test if he is holding hard. He is, thick as a tree where it comes up out of the grass, the ridges of the roots, her twin dark moons swallowing and letting go, a little sticky sound. The long, slack, oily curve of her side, ribs to hip bone, floats under his fingertips idle as a gull's glide. Love has lulled her, liquor has carried her off. Bless that dope. "Jan," he whispers, "you awake?" He is not displeased to be thus stranded. Another consciousness in bed is a responsibility, a snag in the flow of his thoughts. Further on in that issue, an article, How to Shop for a Car Loan, he ought to look at for professional reasons, though it's not the sort of thing that interests him. He can't get it out of his head how they noticed those coffee grounds that jump out of the can when punctured. Janice snores, a single rasp of breath taken under water, at some deep level where her nose becomes a harp. Big as the night, her ass, unconscious, wraps him all around in this room, where dabs of street light, sifted by the beach, shuffle on the ceiling. He decides to fuck her. The stiffness in his cock is killing him. His hard-on was her idea anyway. The Japanese beetle he flicked away comes into his mind as a model of delicacy. Hold tight, dream girl. He sets 3 fingers on her flank, the pinky lifted as if in a counting game. He is stealthy so as not to wake her, but single in his purpose, quick and pure. The climax freezes his scalp and stops his heart, all stealthy. He hasn't come with such a thump in months. So who says he's running out of gas? I hit the ball okay, Rabbit says next afternoon, but damned if I could score. He is sitting in green bathing trunks at a white outdoor table at the Flying Eagle Tea and Racket Club, with the partners of his round and their wives, and, in the case of Buddy Inglefinger, girlfriend. Buddy had once had a wife, too, but she left him for a telephone lineman down near Westchester. You could see how that might happen, because Buddy's girlfriends are sure a sorry lot. "When did you ever score?" Ronnie Harrison asks him so loudly, heads in the swimming pool turn around. Rabbit has known Ronnie for 30 years and never liked him. One of those locker-room show-offs, always soaping himself for everybody to see, and giving the JVs red bellies, and out on the basketball court, barging around all sweat and elbows, trying to make up in muscle what he lacked in style. Yet when Harry and Janice joined Flying Eagle, there old Ronnie was, with a respectable job at Schuylkill Mutual, and this nice, proper wife who taught 3rd grade for years and must be great in bed, because that's all Ronnie ever used to talk about. He was like frantic on the subject in the locker room. His kinky brass-colored hair, that began to thin right after high school, is pretty thoroughly worn through on top now, and the years and respectability have drained some pink out of him. The skin from his temples to the corners of his eyes is papery and bluish, and Rabbit doesn't remember that his eyelashes were white. He likes playing golf with Ronnie because he loves beating him, which isn't too hard. He has one of those herky-jerky punch swings short, stocky guys gravitate toward, and when he gets excited he tends to roundhouse a big banana right into the woods. "I heard Harry was a big scorer," Ronnie's wife Thelma says softly. She has a narrow, forgettable face, and still wears that quaint, old-fashioned kind of one-piece bathing suit with a little pleated skirt. Often she has a towel across her shoulders or around her ankles, as if to protect her skin from the sun. Except for her sunburnt nose, she is the same sallow color all over. Her wavy, mousy hair is going gray strand by strand. Rabbit can never look at her without wondering what she must do to keep Harrison happy. He senses intelligence in her, but intelligence in women has never much interested him. "I set the B-League county scoring record in 1951, he says, to defend himself, and to defend himself further adds, "Big deal." It's been broken long since, Ronnie feels he has to explain, by blacks. Every record has, Webb Murcutt interposes, being tactful. "I don't know, it seems like the miles these kids run now have shrunk. In swimming they can't keep the record books up to date." Webb is the oldest man of their regular foursome, 50 and then some. A lean, thoughtful gentleman in roofing and siding contracting and supply, with a calming gravel voice, his long face broken into longitudinal strips by creases, and his hazel eyes almost lost under an amber tangle of eyebrows. He is the steadiest golfer, too.